Hello, 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 hello. Thank you so much for joining, Tiffany. I give everyone a few minutes to log on. If you are already on, hit that share, let somebody know that we are live, or tag someone on in, and let them know that we are live. We're continuing our conversation about trauma. We have been talking about complex trauma, and so today we're going to continue that conversation. I felt the need to kind of broaden our discussion around trauma a little bit more. So tag somebody on in, hit that share, let somebody know that we are live, that we are live. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Hope that you are doing well. We'll get started in just a little bit. All right, let's get started. Let's get started. Let's get started. Hello, IG. Hello, Facebook. Let's get started. Okay, so today we're going to talk about generational trauma. I felt the need, and I started off a little bit saying this a minute ago before, when we first got started. So if you weren't there, then welcome. My name is Dr. Tiffany. I am a trained therapist, and I am a relationship expert and an avid mental health advocate. I believe in mental health. I believe in people being healthy, whole, and we specifically work with, in our coaching business, I work with women who are healing and recovering from trauma, relational trauma. So that could be the relationship, that could be divorce, that could be a breakup, that could be a multitude facet things, a lot of things. It could be a lot of things. So one thing that I felt the need to really address, because I see it so much, just everywhere. And a lot of the clients that I've worked with, and just interacting with people every day, is the concept of trauma. A lot of people don't know what it means. So, just to kind of make sure that we're providing the right information, because there's a lot of information out there, guys. I say this every day. There's a lot of information out there. And sometimes with social media, we can actually be on information overload. But I wanted to make sure that we provide true, accurate information. And so I wanted to dive a little bit deeper just in the topic of trauma and what that looks like, and more specifically in light of the Buffalo Massacre, which is saddens me. It saddens me that someone would have that much hurt, that much pain, that much hate in their heart, that they would target really killing a certain population. But if we're really honest, and we are over here, what we saw with the Buffalo Massacre is just a repeated thing that has happened in our society in multiple ways, when it comes to African Americans. And so in that, I felt the need to show up and talk about generational trauma, because it's something that we don't necessarily talk about. And when we talk about racism, and we're talking about even some of the traumas that you're dealing with your own life, a lot of that may not have started with you. a lot of it may have started with people that were before you, and you're just so happen to feel the effects, or if it's starting to show up in your life and how you do relationships and how you interact with other people, in the type of partners that you choose, and sometimes even in the diagnosis, things that are going on in your body. Generational trauma, a trauma can pass from one generation to the next. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, is just that generational trauma and what actually is that, because it really is a new concept. I think it may have just come up somewhere around the 60s. With us really smart psychologists who have begun to see like this increase of clients that came. It was like an influx of clients that would come in, and what she began to notice was that most of the clients that were coming in were Holocaust survivors. They were children of Holocaust survivors, and then there were grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. And so that led her to kind of do some further research. And then the concept of generational trauma was released, I believe, in 1988. And so what she began to see, I think it was like over 300% of the clients that came in with certain psychological behaviors. She started seeing a pattern that they all were connected back to Holocaust survivors, or their families were Holocaust survivors. And so that leads us to talking about, like, what exactly is generational trauma, and is it just related to Holocaust survivors? No, it's not. Actually, anyone could experience generational trauma, so it's not just related or relative to a particular a race. It's not, or culture. It's not relative to that. But what we tend to see is that certain cultures or certain race that have endured or went through some very horrific things, we start seeing behaviors and things that start not just behaviors, but even genetic processes, and we'll talk about that a little bit, that start developing, that begin to be passed down from generation to generation. So let's start there. Let's talk about what exactly is generational trauma. So generational trauma, according to, I think this is health.com that I'm getting this definition from, is being systematically exploited, enduring repeated and continual abuse, racism, and poverty are all traumatic events to cause what the doctors say, the really smart people, the biologists and the scientists of the world, cause genetic changes. And what they say those genetic changes are genetic processes. And so genetic processes are biological processes that are involved in the transmission of hereditary traits. Now, hereditary traits, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible, guys, because it can kind of get deep. So what hereditary traits is literally the chromosomes in the genes in your mama that met with the genes in your daddy that made you. So all of these come together, and they're literally passed down from one, or they say organisms, we say persons. So from one person to another. So when a person is enduring or is going through a traumatic event such as slavery, racism, or being exposed to poverty, or different situations like this, that the really smart people of the world says it begins to change their genetic makeup. This stuff can get really, really, really interesting and really, really deep. So what are some symptoms that we begin to see as a result of what we say this genetic, or this augmentation of your genetic makeup, or how you made up, that's been passed down from your parents and your grandparents onto you? What are some symptoms that we begin to see? So we begin to see what we call hypervigilance. And so hypervigilance is when you're always on edge. The people who are always on edge, and we see these people, they're always on edge, kind of always proactive, just always on guard. That's hypervigilance, or a sense of a shortened future, like not feeling like they're going to last longer, that they're not going to live a long life, and that they're going to die early. It's a shortened sense of a shortened future. Or mistrust. They don't trust anyone. We know exactly what mistrust is. They may have a hard time trusting people. They may have a hard time trusting society. They may have a hard time trusting even like in corporate America, they may have a hard time trusting. And I know this I can say this because I'm Black, the white people. They may have a hard time trusting that. Aloofness or high anxiety, depression, panic attack, nightmares, insomnia, a sensitive flight or fight response. And we've been talking about the fight, flight, or the phone response. We've been talking about that, the fight or flight response. But there's a higher level of sensitivity for people who have gone through or experiencing generational trauma than most people that have not. And then we also see this self-esteem and self-confidence issues. So I began talking about this just a few minutes ago, and that some of the issues, we've been talking about trauma. So some of these are really not any different from the symptoms of trauma. But what makes it generational trauma is that you don't just see these symptoms with you, but you begin to see these symptoms in different family members, or you begin to see, and we know this because we know people who say all the time, well, my grandma was like that, or my daddy was like that, or I remember I had a great auntie that was like that. Here's how you know if it's generational. That's one sign. Another thing that you can look for in generational trauma is certain things that have happened to multiple people in your family's line. So you may see alcoholism that have started with your great great grandfather, and then maybe you have a great great aunt or uncle who is battling alcoholism. Or you may have someone else in that family who may not be battling alcoholism, but they're battling with some other kind of addiction. But what we start seeing is that addiction. Oh, sorry. IG, somebody was texting me. I forgot to put my phone on silent. But what we start seeing is literally patterns of those things happening from generation to generation and generation, and they're literally being passed down in several generations. Now, another thing that we start to see with people who are battling or may have some generational trauma going on is we may see several, and I'm saying this because this is relative to my family, we may literally start seeing patterns of things like rape happening. Now, I can be transparent in saying, in my family line, I literally had to sit down and look at my family. Because in some families, because we don't trust, like we may have issues with trusting, and actually the issues with trust, especially with generational trauma, there can be some very real ground when you have not experienced other people that you can trust, even in your own family. So the issues with mistrust may actually be very, very relative. Okay, so I'm saying this for my family. I literally had to sit down in my family line and trace back, well, why is so and so like this, and why do I feel like I wasn't as close to so and so than I was to so and so. Why is there a pattern of abandonment issues all throughout my family? Like, why is that? Where is that connected to? Like, where did that pattern start from? And so we'll start seeing families. I'm talking about my family now. We'll start seeing where certain family members just took off and went away for 5 and 10 years, or for a year or 2 years at some very pivotal times in their children's lives. And then you're wondering why this person can't connect with other people, and why is it that this person just have this anger and this resentment and this bitterness towards their parents, because their parents weren't there. They up and left them. But then we look back a little bit further, and well, their mama did it to them, and then their daddy did it to them, and now even though it happened to you, here you go. I'm talking about my family now. You have up and left your family and your children for someone else to care for. And then there's somebody else that emerges out of that, and they're repeating those same cycles. And those same cycles literally go from generation to generation to generation to generation until they meet you. And then you start questioning, well, why in the world does this is so and so, and why is this, and who had nobody ever thought about this? Like, why had nobody said, let's sit down and trace our family pattern? Why does this keep happening? Why do we need to continue? Why do we need to continue generations of abandonment, generations of rejection, generations of abuse, generations of, why do we need to continue these cycles? And this is something of what we're seeing in our world, is that people are starting to wake up and say, hey, this may have happened with generations past. This, I'm sorry, I may be getting a little emotional, but this may have happened with generations past, but at some point, this stuff has to end. It has to end. It has to stop somewhere. So where are the people in their generation? And I don't care what generation you're in. I don't care what age you're in. At what point are you going to rise up as the generational cycle breaker and say, hey, it didn't start with me, but it ends with me? I'm putting the stop to the generational patterns that have happened in my family, the trauma that had been passed down. Yeah, I know traditionally with slavery that the men were strategically taken from their families, and the men have not that were strategically taken from their families were not there to cover their families, and the women were left to fend for themselves and take on the burden of their family. But not now. Slavery is no more. The only slavery that is in existence right now, I'm talking about United States. There's some other slavery that can get deep too. There's that, even the concept of slavery, because even in Mississippi, there are some slavery systems that are still in operation. But I'm talking about the mental slavery. It can end with you. It can end with you. So how do you do that? Because we can talk about this all day long, but how do you do that? Like, how do you begin the cycle, or begin the steps of going through and healing generations of things that have happened in your past? Like, that's a big task. Have you ever thought about, well, how do I go back and heal generations of stuff that have happened to me, like that have been passed down in my family line? How do I do that? Well, how do I begin to do that? That's a big task, and it is a big task. Well, number one, it starts with awareness. Like I told you, I had to sit down. And even today, before I got, Lord, every day, every day, this stuff does not, like, if I'm teaching it to you guys, I get taught first. Like, it comes to me first. I have to process and deal with it first before I can teach it to you guys. So every day I'm like, oh, I gotta say this live. Yes, I have to say this live. I gotta say this live because I have to, I just have to, in the spirit of transparency. But literally today, I'm sitting down preparing for today, but for now, and it dawns on me, oh my gosh, do you realize that there have been times in your life, and this is me talking, just me and my conversation with God. There have been times in your life where you have not been as emotionally available as you should have been. The term transparency. Do you realize that there are some times in your life where you have not been emotionally present or available as you should not have been, even in your quest for trying to do certain things in your life? Do you realize that, Tiffany? Yeah, I realized that. Okay. So that's awareness. So what do I do with that awareness? The next step I did, I literally had to allow myself to feel the emotions of what that was like. Like, where did that come from? Like, yeah, my mama was like that, my biological mom. Yeah, there are some other people in my life that are like that. Yeah, this came from, my dad, that's on my dad's side too. Like, I'm literally traveling through my family line, seeing where emotional unavailability has been literally permeating through from one generation to another. And then with that awareness and sitting with all of that emotion, and it was heavy. And I'm still processing it, y'all. Like, I'm still processing it. I'll probably be processing this one for a few days. For a few days, probably a few weeks. Like, it's heavy. But with that awareness, with all of those emotions, I literally have to say, okay, where are there other areas in my life where this is manifesting? Like, is this showing up in other areas of my life? Like, what am I seeing that, if I'm emotionally available, then what else am I doing? Oh, you're carrying on too much. You're carrying on your load and other people's load. Oh my goodness. You mean to tell me when I disconnect from other people, when I don't trust other people, that I literally start carrying on other people's stuff that I shouldn't be carrying, other loads, other stresses, other behaviors, other roles that I shouldn't be carrying on. Now, this is me processing my stuff. Okay. I'm processing my stuff right now as we talk live. Okay. Some of this I'm processing right now. So you mean to tell me I'm taking on responsibilities that I'm not supposed to be taking on, or I've taken on even emotional responsibilities that I'm not supposed to take on, and then I'm wondering why stress is starting to manifest, and anxiety, and why other things that are going on in our bodies. Because remember, trauma just does not live on the outside. Sometimes we see trauma as stress and anxiety and depression, and we see trauma can manifest in those things, but sometimes trauma lives in our body. That was the name of that book, by the way, from the other day. It was The Body Keeps Score. Trauma lives in our bodies. And so we wonder why we have family members with diseases and cancers that have been passed down. Okay. This can get real deep. We have diseases and cancers and certain symptoms and things that have been passed down literally from one generation to another generation because of unhealed trauma. Remember, trauma, and I said this in the beginning, it was the reason why I said this is because trauma will change the genetic processes that are in your traits, your hereditary traits that literally can be passed down from one generation to the next. So we wonder why we have all these behaviors and learn things that are learned, some that are not learned, some literally are passed down through our genetics, how we made up, how our bodies are made up, and we are predisposed to certain things because sometimes of generational trauma. So we have to go back and literally travel through our bloodline, look at some of the things that are showing up in our life that don't need to show up. I think we put up with too much in our lives that we shouldn't put up with, not just with people, but even with ourselves. Like, we put up with too much that we don't have to put up with. Like, we shouldn't be walking around not feeling our best and not being able to connect with people and stressed out and anxious and depressed. That's not our original design. That's not our original design. So we put up with too much stuff that sometimes we just need to process through. We need to heal through. We need to actually go back and start cutting off. Okay. And we talked about yesterday with inner vows, starting denouncing things that we have literally let set up in our life, or continue patterns that we've let continue in our life, that we have the power. You have the power. It did not start with you, but it can stop with you. You have the power to say, no, not here, not anymore, not in my family, not with my grandchildren, not with my great-grandchildren, not with the great-great-great-grandchildren that I see in the future. You have the power to stop that now, today. Okay. I know I'm well over my time. So where do we go now? Where do we go next? We'll continue talking about this, by the way, because the whole concept of generational trauma, racism, and all this, is learned. Like, racism, I feel like, is learned, but it also can be passed down from generation to generation. This stuff can be passed down. We see it is passed down from generation to generation. My God. And then we see it in play with our political systems, and we see it in play in our educational systems, and we see it play. Why are they at play in those systems? Is because people operate those systems, and a lot of times the people that operate those systems are unhealed people. Okay, I'm done. I'm done for today. So where do we go? I offer free discovery call, free 30-minute calls from me with people who are interested in taking the next step. Like I say, I would talk about hard life topics. That's what we do. These midday sessions, they're designed for talking about hard life topics. I realize you may be somewhere where you can't process it all. So go back and watch the replay. Grab you a notebook and a pen and paper and take notes so you can actually, you can work through, process and work through some of these things. I love you. You guys have a wonderful day. If you're on IG and you're interested in scheduling a discovery call with me, you can go straight to my profile. I think it says schedule now or book now. Click on that. And it'll take you straight to Square where you'll be able to book directly from there. If you are on Facebook, how you can book is by going to my messenger. You can go to my messenger. No, you don't have to go to my messenger. If you go look at the bottom of this, you will see at the bottom of this where we are, you'll see a pinned comment. And on that pinned comment, it will have schedule a call with us. And you can click that button right there. It'll take you directly to Square, the same place it'll take my IG people to, where you can book a discovery call for free. Free 30-minute call with me. I love you guys. I'll see you back here tomorrow. We'll continue talking about this a little bit more. You guys have a wonderfully, wonderfully blessed Tuesday. See you guys tomorrow.